hard to know how to get started. We'll let the septic go. Can you hear that? Hi. If you're watching this, then you're currently enrolled in PS 231, which covers strategic models. And as of right now, I'm your professor, Rob Carroll. I know that you have a lot of choices to make between now and the start of the fall semester in terms of how your schedules are going to look. And my syllabi aren't all the way finalized just yet, so I can't give you all the details that you might need. Nevertheless, it seemed like a good idea to check in with you to let you know what you might be able to expect from the class. So, without further ado, no, that was stupid. No, that was still stupid. This is PS 231. Alright, the TLDR is this class will be entirely online. I know that that makes things a little bit tricky, and especially at the scale that we're talking about, where we've got like 75 or 80 students enrolled right now, although after watching the first opening part, we're probably down to about 30, who knows. So in order to make the most of our highly isolated situation, we're going to employ a flipped classroom. Now, you might not have had one of those before, so let me tell you what that means in broad brushstrokes. So in a traditional classroom, which is every class I've taught up to this point, and probably the vast majority of classes that you've taken, you come to class at a certain time, scheduled time, and you listen to me, the professor, talk at you for a while. I might be a really innovative professor and I try to come up with interesting ways to get you to participate more actively, but more or less you come and you're waiting to be given information in one way or another. And then you go home, and in a perfect world, and for some of you this is true, and others, less so, you go home and you do work on your own time for the class, and ideally that's when you're picking up skills, right? So you might be doing some extra reading with additional context from having seen a lecture. You might do homework or a problem set or something like that. You might write a paper. You might study for a quiz or an exam that's coming up, but regardless, sort of the actual learning happens at home in your pajamas with tea, right? Just getting content you come to class for. A flipped classroom flips that. So each week, I will be posting a video like this one that has all of the content for the week. I'll post it the weekend prior to the coming week. You'll have a chance to watch that video, which has all of the lecture type content in advance. And then the scheduled times that we have, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we'll be using that time to clarify any questions you might have about the lecture that you watched, or to get to work on the weekly problem set. I did just say weekly problem set. Don't close. Don't close. Do not close the window yet. I swear it's going to be fine. I mean, if there's 15 problem sets, I'm not going to be able to ask you to write War and Peace every time, right? Instead, I want to make sure that you don't fall behind, because game theory is the sort of topic where you want to slowly accumulate knowledge. You want to slowly accumulate skills. You don't want to studying and then forgetting, and then studying and then forgetting. We don't want to set up that sort of dynamic. Instead, we want to incentivize you putting in a little bit of effort every week, slowly mastering the material, so that by the time you get to the take-home final, by the time you get to that, you should have plenty of muscles to get through that. And so I hope you'll view this as a little bit more of a journey rather than a series of content, because this is much more about you developing the skill of doing game theory rather than it is about you gaining some knowledge of all of the terms of game theory. Okay, well, what is game theory then? Well, at its most basic, game theory is the rigorous study of strategic interdependence. And that is not a great answer in terms of giving you a lot of useful content. It's a set of mathematical tools. I know, I said the M word. Don't worry, we'll talk about that in a second. It's a set of mathematical tools, by which I mean like a collection of mathematical models or mathematical objects that we use to be decision makers or strategic contexts, and a related set of techniques for studying those models. So it's a set of mathematical tools like that that allow us to try to figure out how intentional decision makers, purpose-driven goal-oriented, intelligent decision makers. I'm going to use a loaded word for those sort of people now. Rational decision makers. How do they make choices and interact with one another? So there are many spheres of social life that aren't particularly interdependent. So for example, if I go to a mini mart and I bought myself a Diet Coke. In fact, let me go get a Diet Coke. I am back from my personal mini mart of a kitchen. So if I went to the mini mart and I got myself a Diet Coke, let's feature both the product and the talent. There's a price attached to the Diet Coke at the mini mart. I don't know how much a Diet Coke costs at a mini mart. It's probably like $1 or something for a can of Diet Coke, but there isn't really any interaction going on. That price doesn't have a whole lot to do with my choices. It might, in some infinitesimal sense, depend on how much I love Diet Coke. But my interaction with the mini mart, or with Coca-Cola, or with the bottler or the distributor, that isn't a particularly strategic interaction because the outcome that happens is really solely determined by how much I love Diet Coke and how much I had to pay to acquire it. On the other hand, there are oftentimes situations where two or more decision makers, the outcome that they enjoy, that outcome is determined by both of their actions very intimately. There's a reason that we call it game theory, although that's a bit of a trivial sounding name. A game like chess or checkers or Go or backgammon or Settlers of Catan or some awful game that probably people want to impose upon you at game night, games like that, there's strategic interdependence baked right in. The outcome of the game, whether it's a win for me, a win for my opponent, or a draw, whether I'm happy, sad, or middlingly indifferent at the end of the chess match, depends very much on the choices that I made and that my opponent made. So what game theory is the study of situations where multiple decision makers influence the outcome through their choices. And we're going to act on the assumption that those decision makers are intelligent, contemplative, rational decision makers. So a little bit more about class logistics. So as I've mentioned, this is a flipped classroom, which means that you'll be doing a little bit of extra work on a week-to-week basis because you have to watch the video at home. Although, to be completely honest with you, if you spent class time watching the video, that would be okay too. So you'll have to watch the video and you'll have to do a problem set every week. So you'll have that problem set. You'll have a chance to interface with me and with the TA for Q&A about the problem set or about the lecture 3 times a week. Which should make for a lot of time for you to get your work done, which should in turn help your understanding. You'll also have a take-home final at the end of the class. You'll also be interacting with me and with others on a wonderful online service called Piazza. If you're watching this video, you've already joined the class's Piazza site. So Piazza is a wonderful place for us to have ongoing dynamic Q&A. So I will post every video there, and I will post every problem set there, and that will enable you to start Q&A type dialogues related to each video or to each problem set. And once a question has been asked, and you're allowed to ask questions anonymously because we want you to ask questions. You should be asking questions, and I know that it's easy to feel like you're so far behind and everybody's so far ahead, and chances are excellent that your assessment on that is not true and that everybody's struggling, and that's okay. So you can ask a question, be it anonymously or otherwise. You'll also be able to answer. So any given question will start 2 wikis. There'll be a top wiki where students can answer the question. That's Chewy. It's very strange doing this in my home. It's necessarily a little bit more, I don't want to say intimate, but personal, And so you're going to get to know my dog, Chewy. I think you can see a painting of him over there on my meticulously constructed home office set. Where was I? Oh, the wikis. So you'll be able to answer a question, which actually teaching somebody else is the surest path to understanding. But also the TA and I will have access to a special instructor's answer wiki so that we can, in case you need a voice of authority to say, actually, no, here's how you solve for a Nash equilibrium in a coordination game, we'll be able to handle that for you too. But I really want to encourage, as much as I can via this format, a fun, nurturing, creative, collaborative environment, because this is a topic that really does its best when those sort of factors are kicking in. It's natural for you to wonder about the textbook. So I will not be assigning a textbook. I will provide a list of recommended textbooks that I think are at an appropriate level for an introductory game theory student. If you have more questions about those, please feel free to let me know. To be honest with you, this is going to be something where you learn by doing a lot more than you learn by reading, but I know that it's comforting to be able to turn to a textbook. Because these things aren't required, you won't have to buy a new copy or anything like that. Rudimentary game theory hasn't really changed all that much, and so you don't have to worry about having some. You could buy an old copy and it's not that big of a deal. So I'll give you some recommended textbooks, and you can procure one that seems like a good fit for you and your needs. And if none of the ones that I recommend seem like a good fit for you and your needs, let me know and I'll make some further recommendations. I should talk about the math thing. So I've used the math word a few times. I understand that many people get beyond fear about math. It can induce anxiety. It can induce panic, and I mean physical panic. I've been there. I'm still there on a week-to-week basis. I don't want you to be deterred by the fact that it's mathematical. To be honest with you, if you have a lot of dedication and some warm and fuzzy memories of high school algebra, and to be completely honest with you, they don't even have to be warm memories. They can just be fuzzy memories of high school algebra. You should be okay. I think that the deeper issue, and this is more problematic than you realize, even though it's something that doesn't get discussed as much, isn't with straight up mathematics, it's with abstraction, right? So in game theory, in political science, we won't be talking about a given political party or a given president. We won't use proper names when we're modeling. We'll be talking about country X, president X, political party X, opposition group X. And that abstraction is what allows game theory to have its wonderful general flavor so that we can relate phenomena that seem very different to one another. We wouldn't be able to do that if we were modeling with a particular interaction in mind. So for example, a classic example of this is the fact that the decision of whether or not to start a war between two countries is very similar in terms of the strategic DNA to the decision about whether or not to have a labor strike by a union that is bargaining with management to try to get higher wages, right? So it turns out that the bargaining associated with labor union management isn't very dissimilar from the bargaining associated with trying to figure out how to divide territory in a way that doesn't make either country too dissatisfied. And that similarity between these two seemingly unrelated phenomena, I mean, we've got two countries versus maybe a union and a negotiator on the management side. That seems really different, right? And then one, the risk is, we don't make widgets at the factory today. And the other is we start a war. It turns out that those things are very similar, and that commonality is really useful. And we wouldn't be able to achieve that level of commonality if we had been modeling about labor unions and management the entire time, nor would we have been able to come up with that kind of connection if we had been modeling countries the entire time. So there's this interesting interplay of different sorts of phenomena and similarities in their strategic DNA. That is purely a product of game theory's capacity to make an interaction very abstract. The mathematical side is really just high school algebra. I mean, you can complicate it if you want to, but for the vast majority of us, the interesting thing about game theory isn't its mathematical qualities, but rather its ability to be abstract in a way that allows us to relate one state of affairs to another. So, if anything, I really want you to come into this class prepared to be abstract. Really, a lot of the fun in teaching game theory to undergraduates isn't about the mathematical or technical details. A lot of the fun lies in showing you all sorts of cool models and showing you how those models map to reality. So really, this ends up being just a collection of models, and depending on how you look at them, they're kind of fables. As you wind up with this set of fables, this set of mathematical objects, this set of simplified realities that allow you to learn a lesson or make a point, that's really what they are. And then you can look and say, oh, I see two countries deciding how to use some scarce resource. That's like a prisoner's dilemma, right? Or you can say, oh, I see people driving on the right side of the road together instead of the left side of the road, and they're not crashing into one another. They're following the law. Oh, that looks like a coordination game. Or I see two people engaged in some sort of bargaining process. I see haggling happening between a used car dealer and a used car buyer. Oh, that looks like an ultimatum game. You know, like all of these little fables ends up being tools in your explanatory kit that help you to know what's going on in a surprisingly large array of strategic situations. So I don't want to tell you that PS231 isn't for you. I just want to talk about people for whom I think that PS231 might be an especially good fit. So if you hear something that relates to you, really consider giving the class a try. So one, if you're a political science major or some other sort of social science major that's interested in taking advanced classes, substantive classes that involve a lot of reading of modern research, if you've already taken a class like that before, or if you've perused a syllabus of one of those, you know that there's a lot of theoretical papers that you're going to have to read. And by theoretical, I mean game theoretic or mathematically theoretical. So you're going to have to read some of these. And if you're anything like me, or like 99% of people when they were political science majors, you know, you're not going to read those mathy parts of the paper. Instead, you'll read the introduction, maybe you'll skim the abstract, you'll go to the conclusion. But it turns out that a lot of the beauty of these papers and their promise in terms of compiling knowledge in a reliable way, that promise depends on us actually engaging with that. So if you want to know how those papers work, a class like this will be a great way for you to get started. And even more broadly, you don't have to be a political scientist to be interested in how we theorize about political processes, right? So all sorts of people theorize about political processes. Commentators, scholars, journalists, policymakers, weird aunts and uncles at the holidays. Everybody's got a theory, right? And some theories are better than others, we suspect. What does that mean, though? We'll talk about that. But some theories seem to come out of nowhere, whereas other theories seem to be part of a well-established tradition of theorizing, right? So if you look at the rationalist international relations tradition, this is essentially a compendium of models, a set of fables, a collection that teach us a set of related lessons about how countries interact with one another. That set of theories is the product of decades of theoretical development, scholar to scholar. But on the other hand, some theories seem to come out of nowhere, and those theories are oftentimes more difficult to understand, they're more difficult to assess because they're not sort of part of a tradition of theory. So if you want to know how traditions of theories emerge, game theory isn't a necessary condition for that. There's all sorts of traditions of theories that aren't game theoretic. But this might be an especially enticing option because so much of game theoretic modeling is at the forefront of political science at the moment. So if you're interested in where theories come from and how they're constructed, then this class might be a really good fit for you. You might be a hard science or engineering major and you've gotten all these wonderful technical skills because you've been laboring through very difficult classes, you've been really struggling, and suddenly you come out and you know all these wonderful things. You have all these amazing technical skills, but you might not find the substantive problems that you've learned how to use them on especially interesting, right? Now that isn't to say that engineering isn't fun. It's a hoot, but we also have all these interesting substantive problems on the social end, and you might be interested to know, if you're a hard science major or an engineering major, you might be interested to know, hey, how do some of these techniques that I've learned apply to that world? Now, I'm not going to be able to give you a comprehensive picture, but I will be able to get your feet wet. If you're one of those people that wonders, how can I apply mathematics to really important social problems or just towards really interesting puzzles, then PS231 might be a great fit for you. I think the broadest thing is doing game theory is super fun, and the reason that it's super fun is that you get to marry these two, we have this myth in our head that there's parts of the brain, right? There are parts of the brain, but we have this really ingrained idea that there's left-brained people and right-brained people. You're either logical or you're creative. You either worry a lot about reality or you have your head in the clouds. If you've ever taken one of these personality tests, they give you some really crazy dichotomy. Oh, would you rather eat popcorn or did you enjoy Lawrence of Arabia? What? You know, like if you ever take one of those tests, then you're like, man, there's more to life than trying to figure out where I am on in this strange dichotomy. You know, and so game theory and game theoretic modeling in political science is really fun because you get to kind of make stuff up. You're writing fables, but those fables have to follow certain rules, right? So game theory, rationality, mathematical modeling in the social sciences, you can view this as sort of like a blank canvas with a set of physics, right? So much the same way that, I'm gonna date myself now. If you play SimCity, or I think this happens in Minecraft, right? So there's a world and it's empty to start. And you need to make something useful or interesting or beautiful in it. And that's a creative process, but you need the buildings that you build to stand. You need the rivers that you move to not overflow. You need certain things to happen. You need a certain amount of rigor. How do we strike that architectural balance between it's functional, it's resilient, it stands up, with it's beautiful, it serves some important purpose. When people interact with it, they get a feeling. How do we combine those two things? And the answer, at least for me, lies in coming up with these fun mathematical fables to try to explain political processes. And so, you know, at the end of this class, I would hope that you have enough skills that you could write down a model of your own if you came upon some conundrum that you didn't fully understand. Even if it's just, you know, when you go home to visit, which of your siblings is the one to take out the trash. Life is full of these little conflicts or these little opportunities for win-win. And it's really fun to try to come up with ways to address those conflicts or those missed opportunities in this way. So what can you expect from me? As you can tell by now, I'm not a filmmaker, but you can expect me to try to come up with interesting content once a week for you to enjoy. I know it's going to be hard for you to stop binging Love is Blind. That's what I've been doing since the quarantine started. I think I'm on my 20th time through that show. I think I have it memorized. Stop the binging, and once a week, tune in for this large round head sending important game theoretic messages to you. And I will work my hardest for it to be clear, for it to be entertaining, for it to be thematic. You know, there's gonna have to be a week named Nash Equilibrium. There's no getting around it. And I'm not super excited about having to make a video entitled Nash Equilibrium. I'd rather show you all these cool things, but unfortunately the building's gotta stand, right? This is more philosophical than I realized. I want this to be a good experience for you and for me, and for us to kind of figure out what's going to happen at the modern research university, you know, and what teaching is going to look like. And so teaching applied game theory, introductory applied game theory to a bunch of undergraduates remotely, that's a difficult charge. And what you can expect from me isn't perfection, because I'm going to screw up so much. You don't know this, but I've actually been making this message for 3 days. This is probably take 39. And everyone has had a just awful, terrible screw up. This one included. And I'm learning that I'm going to have to be okay with those screw ups. And so you can expect them from me. But what you can expect is effort and enthusiasm. You can expect this to be as personal as possible, even though right now I'm talking into a can and you're watching on some screen. I don't want you to confuse this for something other than a full-on University of Illinois class. You can also expect from me to try to view you as a human being. Being a college student is already complicated, right? But I know that there are some particular challenges, logistical challenges, psychological challenges, workload challenges, economic challenges, other challenges that I couldn't even pretend to know what to guess on, right? And you can expect me to be patient and fair as best I can. Now, patient and fair means I have to be fair to everybody, right? And so don't expect me to just round up every time. Don't expect me to say, oh no, it's okay if your problem set is 7 weeks late. That isn't fair. But if you have a real problem, I hope that you'll eventually feel comfortable enough with me that you can trust that I will act in good faith with you. Things I won't tolerate. Well, as you may have guessed from the very inelegant ramble from just before, it's not going to be cool if you don't see the humanity in others. So we all have to be patient, and we all have to be understanding, and we all have to be generous, and we all have to be charitable. That means that you have to be patient, generous, humble, and charitable with your fellow students. That means you have to be patient. I've already lost the order. Patient, generous, humble, and charitable with the TA. You have to work hard to say, this is a strange situation, and I'm going to learn a lot of game theory in the next 15 weeks, but there's going to be wrinkles. And in moments like those, let's collaborate, right? Let's prototype this class. Let's try to make this better. And I'm so sorry that you have to be a guinea pig in that process, that you're part of the experiment rather than the people that get to benefit from a finished, polished product, you know? And I have two responses to that. No, three. One, I'm actually genuinely sorry about that, and not apologetic sorry. You know, we've kind of taken the word sorry and now it just means I apologize, but I'm genuinely sorry. Like, I feel sad about that. Number two, you know, many of the classes that you've benefited from that have been more polished or more complete have been the product of experimentation, iteration, and prototyping because of other students. And so you have benefited a little bit from that. And so I hope that you'll come to view this as all just some big process that you're part of, and I'm part of, and previous students have been part of, and everybody at the University of Illinois is part of. And when you see it that way, it's harder to get too worked up about any given slight. And three, I'm a guinea pig too. I think it's really fun to think through the puzzle about how to best teach this material under this particular set of constraints. And I happen to love this material, so I think it's really important that we teach it well. But there is no manual for how to do this, right? You could get angry at me if you were like, well, on page 3 of the introductory textbook entitled How to Teach Game Theory to 90 Students Remotely During Some Unexpected Epidemic, right? So that's the book that you think I should have read. If that were the case, then okay, I'm with you. But instead, I've been on YouTube learning how to make movies. And you're like, this is the product of that? Sadly, yes, it's actually pretty hard, but it's also a lot of fun. So I expect you to understand that this is a process and that your being part in this experiment is greatly appreciated. I genuinely feel gratitude if you decide to stay in this class. My septic tank again. I'm sure I've already talked over it a few times. Intimate, personal, in my home, on my septic tank. Well, now I want the Diet Coke. Let's see if I can get the sound effect on the mic pretty good. How does this sound? That's advertising gold, you guys. Advertising gold! So remember, this class is an online class taught Mondays and Wednesdays at 9 in the morning, and then you'll have a discussion section sometime on Friday. Is a flipped classroom, which means that you'll be watching online content through videos like this one over the weekend or maybe early in the week, and then you'll be spending the scheduled class time asking me or the TA questions about the lectures or about the problem sets. There will be a take-home final at the end of the class, which shouldn't be too difficult if you've put a lot of time into your weekly problem sets. Those weekly problem sets are where the majority of your grade will come from, and you'll be able to drop a few. If you have any further questions about the class, please feel free to send me an email at rjc@illinois.edu. I'll be happy to answer your questions as best I can, although things aren't all the way finalized just yet. I'll be in touch with some more information just to let you know when the syllabus is finalized. Other than that, I'm really looking forward to seeing you sometime soon. Thanks for watching. I had been hoping that this would be a 2-minute video. What are your thoughts on that? I don't think this is a 2-minute video. That's my guess. That's my hunch.